Speaking of BangTheBook.com, we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Lots of great stuff going on over there right now. I did my 30 MLB season win total previews, kind of a general overall preview for the season. Well, now I'm doing 30 team-specific, player-specific previews with some betting tips, angles I'll be looking at, things like that. Posted the American League East on Wednesday. Probably going to post the American League Central here, at least some of the teams, on Thursday, and keep working on those on Friday, as we won't have a show. So it gives me a little bit more time to do some writing over there. But I'll have all 6 divisions ready to go probably by Tuesday or Wednesday or so. Give you, again, some specific team and player betting thoughts I'm looking at. These are things I'll talk about in my daily picks piece over at BangTheBook.com as well. Speaking of daily picks, got those from Kyle Hunter on the college basketball side. Got those from Parker Michaels on the NHL side. Lots of daily NBA and college basketball betting content from our very talented cast of writers over there. And be on the lookout for some good stuff next week for March Madness as well. We've got NASCAR, we've got soccer, we've got tennis from Big Ten Watto, we've got golf, we've got UFC. We cover all the weekly stuff as well over there at BangTheBook.com. Finally, as you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. We start things off here with that UFC Fight Night 147 segment with Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast. Darren Till, Jorge Masvidal, the main event there in that one. We talked about all of the fights that intrigued Christian on that card. So here is that UFC on ESPN Plus 5 segment with Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast. All right, I'm joined now by Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast. We're going to chat here about UFC Fight Night 147, or if you want to call it UFC on ESPN Plus number 5. Christian, how's it going today, man?
No better time to be in Vegas, bro. We got baseball coming. We got baseball in 6 days. We have a UFC event every single week. We got March Madness conference tournaments. No place in the world I'd rather be right now.
Speaking of baseball in 6 days, you threw me for a serious loop when we were talking before recording here. I completely forgot about that opening series in Japan between Seattle and Oakland, and that is coming up very, very quickly here. So baseball bettors are going to have to figure some things out here in short order.
Yeah, they really are. And, you know, while all eyes are on March Madness, on conference tournament, on the NCAA tournament, this is kind of my favorite time to go full on, you know, hard press on MLB futures. And I think it's going to maybe mess some people up if they're, you know, people that like to wait, because Oakland's win total is going to come off the board. Seattle's win total is going to come off the board. You're going to see a little bit of movement if you know, maybe most home run prop comes off the board because of Chris Davis there, whether he plays or not. So, you know, not to mention the, you know, division odds are going to, you know, basically be fluid based on what happens within the, you know, that random series. So futures odds for your books may come off the board very, very early that you know may not realize. So definitely would say get on it and get them in now, you know.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I know that we're going to talk UFC here in this segment, but both of us are Major League Baseball guys. I've been doing a ton of work at BangTheBook.com. I saw you've been posting some stuff, and make sure you follow Christian on Twitter at Christian Pina, P-I-N-A. Man, there's been a lot of news here lately. You know, we've got plenty of injuries in spring training already. It's been a very busy news cycle over the last couple of weeks in baseball.
It has. And again, you know, it's so funny because I feel like baseball kind of gets this momentum, right? And then it's in a really bad time of year because now NFL free agency comes in and it just ruins any momentum that baseball has had, and people forget about it, except kind of the diehards that I'm not somebody that kind of, you know, obsesses over NFL free agency to be the first person to see a tweet. I mean, you're going to see everything unless it's something that's going to drastically affect odds that I'm trying to get out ahead of. If for whatever reason I was trying to get on board with the Cleveland future or whatever, then that would, you know, be an issue and something I would be monitoring. But I mean, you're going to see it anyway, unless you're betting markets that, I mean, again, most futures aren't even really out there besides the obvious, you know, Super Bowl one. So baseball gets kind of thrown by the wayside for, you know, many different reasons. That's the biggest one, but so many storylines, so many, you know, prospects coming up. There's, you know, service time issues. CBA needs to get redone to rectify that. And just so many stories. And one of the reasons I love the game so much.
Yeah, I love it too. And, you know, I know you and I have kind of talked offline about the different ways that we attack the baseball betting market and some different considerations that we have. So maybe that'll be something that we do work into these UFC events as we go throughout the summer, because I don't do full shows. I do my MLB podcast twice a week, and we'll be doing these UFC segments. So maybe we'll get some more baseball in there at that point in time. But let's go across the pond over to London here. Again, whether you call it Fight Night 147, UFC on ESPN Plus number 5, or Fight Night Till versus Masvidal. You got a lot of different ways to reference this card. And before we get into the specific matchups, Christian, what do you think about the card overall?
It's going to be entertaining. I think that specifically the main event is a little more, there's a lot more that meets the eye when you look at that betting line. I mean, Gunnar Nelson and Leon Edwards are two guys that, are prolific finishers, which should be very, very entertaining as you go down. Oezdemir Reyes, that this is kind of again, two strikers looking to sit in the middle and bang it out until one person goes down. So the top three fights on the main card are very, very, let's say casual fan friendly. You go down, John Phillips, Jack Marshman is another one that should be two guys trading blows. So all the way down, top to bottom, it's a very casual fan friendly card. What I mean by that is high potential of finishes, high potential of knockouts, and a lot of very live underdogs here. I would say that a lot of these fights, I've always heard matchmaking people within the UFC always, because they're one of the most forefronting when it comes to gambling, right? They present their odds and they know that they can grow their sport, and they always said that their goal is to make every fight a -110 fight, which is a little bit laughable sometimes because there's the obvious showcase fights, but they did a pretty good job here, and there's a lot of very live underdogs in the +115, +120 to +140 range that if you take a contrarian approach here and hope to hit maybe 40%, I think you could do really well here. So a lot of coin flip fights that, maybe I do lean one way, but from a price perspective is dog or pass. So it's a very interesting card, with a polarizing main event.
Well, one of the things that you like to talk about, one of the buzz expressions that you have here on our segments is paths to victory. And when you're talking about the likely to have a finish and not go to the cards, you sort of level the playing field a little bit more in terms of paths to victory. So do you find that, when you expect a finish, you kind of gravitate towards the dog first and then sort of hash out your thought process?
Yeah, exactly. And again, every situation is a little bit different. If I'm expecting a finish from a showcase fight against Francis Ngannou, just because they're both, punchers, again, in theory, the Derek Lewis fight, all that type of stuff kind of goes into that. But yeah, if two guys have the same style, and, one is maybe just a little bit a little bit better defensively, to be shaded to a -130. It makes total sense from a long-term perspective to take that underdog. Again, the UFC, I believe, right next to Major League Baseball at 43%, UFC at 39% for the top two underdog winners, percentage-wise that underdogs come in to win. So long-term, it certainly does make sense. If you were going to only play one, I would certainly tell you to play underdogs just because this is a fist fight in a cage and anything could happen. But you should look at everything a little bit objectively and not just take one approach like that. But definitely if they're similar, again, a la Cody Garbrandt, who just doesn't use defense anymore, apparently, anyone who has that kind of puncher's chance at this, at the evenly priced line, definitely makes sense to lean towards the underdog pretty much always.
All right, so we start with the main event here on this card. Darren Till, Jorge Masvidal. Till a -260 favorite over at DSI Sportsbook right now. As always, shop around for the best prices. And also, recording this here around lunchtime, at least Eastern time on Thursday. Should get this out by Thursday night, since we're not doing the full shows here Thursday and Friday with all the basketball stuff. But you had a lot of things to say to me when we started, talking here about this card, about just so many layers to this main event fight.
Yeah, and this is really this line, let me say this first. This line is not right. And I'm not saying to go out there and lay the farm on Jorge Masvidal. Should Darren Till be slightly favored? Yes. You are paying, which I don't think I have ever seen in my life before, you're paying a fighter premium that's not even in this fight. This line is this way because this is Ben Askren rearing his head into a UFC event once again, like we talked about. This again, fight is in London. Another reason this line is stretched out so far is Darren Till returning to his hometown, where he is just as beloved, I would say, as Conor McGregor in Ireland, if you could believe that. That's how big he is over there. So he's going to have hometown fans on his side, hometown judges, and the Ben Askren factor looming. What I mean by Askren is the UFC has flown him over to London to confront him to set up the Darren Till Ben Askren fight. Now, they are really this is, something that looks to me like if anyone out there bets, the WWE market where things are really kind of baked into it, this to me screams that type of scenario. And I'm not saying anything is fixed. I'm just saying you're paying an absolute premium at the top of the market to back a guy like Darren Till. Now, self-admittedly, I have never been a big fan of Darren Till. I have bet against him against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I may probably, again, biased, but I still think he lost that fight. I bet against him against Tyron Woodley. I think he's raw. I think he's green, and I just don't think of him as a well-rounded mixed martial artist. That being said, the size advantage here for a guy like Darren Till cannot be overlooked. I mean, he should be. I mean, again, Masvidal never been finished in 10 plus years. I mean, that is an absolutely incredible streak. This is a 5-round fight. I would hope for a round prop, much like when we were talking about Woodley Oezdemir. If I could get a 3.5 and lay a little bit of juice, I would be absolutely thrilled. And the same thing, maybe even I can get a 4.5 or a fight goes to this or work a prop bet that way. But Masvidal is being a little bit disrespected in this line, but I understand the outside factors to make him this big of a favorite or underdog.
Well, and this is one of those too. We've talked about some events. There was one event a couple of weeks ago where they were there for the first time. Last week they were in Wichita. There were some judging questions. We weren't exactly sure what we could expect from the judges if the thing went the distance. Here with Till at home in London, I think there could be some judging shenanigans as well.
I mean, specifically in this main event, again, I think that is really baked into this line a little bit at -240 or -250 for Darren Till, depending on your shop. I mean, this fight is a lot closer on paper. I mean, I'm talking maybe -130, -140. So if you're a value guy, I think you definitely should take a shot on the underdog. That being said, he's going to have to overcome, so much here, including potentially judges, including potentially fans, the oohing and awing, the, incredible reception for Till that's going to inevitably be there. So there's a lot to overcome, especially when you're fighting a guy this beloved. Again, I would really liken it to a version of McGregor, fighting McGregor in Ireland, and imagine how rowdy that would be and judging and potentially, fight for whatever the essential circumstances you want to make here. Masvidal has to overcome it, and he has to do so at a size disadvantage while trying to kind of, play Till's game against him. Again, Masvidal never been finished in 10 plus years, so Till's going to have to look to use his size, hold him up against the cage, dirty box, and try to bully him around a little bit. But Masvidal always showed size doesn't matter, and he's game for any type of match.
So I guess the question here basically is, I mean, instead of taking the +210 with Masvidal, the right play here, because it seems like it's nearly impossible for him to win via decision, would be to just increase your potential profitability and hope that he finds a way to finish Darren Till, right?
I think Masvidal has shown that he can adapt to anybody's game plan. I think he could win a decision in theory. It's going to be very hard. Again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, English judges, London judges are not going to allow Till. If he loses a very obvious decision, that's probably, it's something that's going to be egregious to the sport. And then again, for whatever reason, judges favor Darren Till's style. Again, a very controversial split decision with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He got that one. That was, when they were trying to build Darren Till on his way to Woodley, because they didn't want Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Woodley 3 or 4 or whatever they're up to now. So it's a little bit crazy that, the storylines and the narrative definitely play into it, but you're paying a premium here for it at -240. So again, it's hard to see a way that Masvidal stylistically can, overcome these odds and everything going on around him in the cage. But again, he's defied expectations time and time again. There could be, again, being the smaller fighter is usually such a disadvantage, but he's shown the ability to do things you just wouldn't expect from a guy that size and should never really be counted out.
I guess the last thing I'll ask you about with the main event, and then we'll move on to the rest of the card. Is there a price on Masvidal where you say, you know what, I can't pass? If this line keeps increasing, is there a point where you go, I have to take it?
I mean, +250, I think, would probably pique my interest. I don't think it gets there, but the public loves Darren Till. We're still a little bit away from London money, actually, in that market coming in to bury Darren Till, I would think as well, much like notorious Russian money comes in on Nurmagomedov, much like Irish money comes in on McGregor. So I think Till's going to have a little bit of that. If you like this dog, I think you wait till the last possible moment. We've seen this time and time again with the favorite steam coming in, leading right up to fight time. So if I got +2.25, I don't think, or +2.5, I don't think I would. I'd be able to pass it into bet that I would expect fully to lose, but I just don't think I could pass it up.
3 welterweight fights on this card here, the main event being one of them, and the lead-in to the main event, Leon Edwards and Gunnar Nelson. Edwards a -125 favorite, +105 on the takeback here for Nelson. This looks like a pretty good fight on paper.
Definitely. And we talked about a guy like Zaleski being buried in this division, and Leon Edwards is the same thing, stacked welterweight division. But, somebody that you like, much like Zaleski, that you should know about. I mean, he's coming off a loss to Kamaru Usman, but who isn't coming off a loss to Kamaru Usman at this point? Edwards is, his kryptonite inside the UFC has always been, if you can do one thing very, elite, he's going to have an issue with it, because Edwards is a guy that is so above average in every category, but he doesn't have one elite category, whether it be his striking, his wrestling, his ground game, submissions, whatever the case may be. So if you only do one thing, elite, he has an issue trying to game plan to stop that, because he just doesn't have the skills in that particular area. He's more of a spread out, well-rounded mixed martial artist. He lost to Damian Maia's wrestling. Santiago Ponzinibbio was post an eye poke, but again, exactly what, Ponzinibbio does in the, kind of that weasel decision type of stuff. So the issue here with Edwards is that Nelson is a submission specialist, and that type of thing has posed problems for a guy like Edwards. If somebody does one thing great, that is exactly who he has problems with. And again, not to say that Gunnar Nelson is this elite, Damian Maia, BJJ, Manny Bermudez submission artist. It's just, you look at the guy and you wouldn't think that he's able to do what he does. And it's absolutely incredible that he's able to do that. It could pose, again, this is, if Edwards isn't able to, this is, to me, very simple. It's Gunnar Nelson by submission. When you talk past to victory, Leon Edwards has more of them. He can knock him out. He could win a decision. I have zero. I don't think Gunnar Nelson could win a decision against Leon Edwards. I think it's Nelson's submission along the way or bust. And while Edwards could, in theory, knock him out, submit him, or win a decision. So past to victory wise, this is why this is one of the ones I was talking about. It's a coin flip. I cannot fault anyone for taking the underdog at plus 130 if you're going to make that decision throughout this card, because Gunnar Nelson has shown time and time again he can do that. It is the type of fighter that Edwards has struggled with, but Edwards has beaten everyone along the way, and again, just lost to really the best of the best along the way.
Now, what about transplant fighters like Leon Edwards, who was born in Jamaica, but pretty much calls his home now England? Do those guys get sort of that same reception when they fight at home?
Yeah, it really depends on the type of fighter and kind of how they endear themselves, right? You've seen this time and time again. Francis Ngannou, Paris, to, France, to training at the UFC's gym in Las Vegas. So, if he went to Paris, would he get a better reception than Vegas? It just depends on the person. It depends on how much they endear themselves, really, and kind of, depending on where they are, from or where they're coming from and coming to go, and kind of what they do to endear themselves to that community, to that fan base, and kind of go from there. Leon Edwards shouldn't have again, I don't think a lot of people even know that fact, to be completely honest with you, just because Leon Edwards is, again, such an under the radar type of fighter, unlike Darren Till, who's big, he's brash, does all the right things. He has this, potential upcoming confrontation with Ben Askren to sell with pay-per-views. Edwards isn't really that type of fighter. He goes out there, he gets the job done, and he does so, professionally and classy. So whether you agree with that or you disagree and think it probably should be the opposite, I wouldn't expect too much in the way of a huge Leon Edwards reception.
All right, so let's take a look here in the light heavyweight division. This one, Dominick Reyes, Volkan Oezdemir. Reyes a pretty big favorite here, minus 260.
Yeah, it really is. And again, this is something where you're expecting a finish. Again, cannot blame you for, taking the underdog shot. This is going to be a theme throughout this card. And it's so funny that, every card that we talk about really seems to have this specific theme, but this is the one of this night. And look, this could be a fight of the night candidate. Both guys willing to stand and trade it. And this is a little bit of a striker versus grappler, but it's a little bit of different when we talk about that, philosophically. Reyes has the grappling advantage for sure, and Oezdemir has the heavier hands. That being said, Reyes is what I would say, Oezdemir is more heavyweight style. He's slow, plodding, uncontrolled, and a little bit, wild out there when he's throwing hands. That being said, if one of those wild and uncontrolled hands lands, Reyes is going to go to sleep. Make no mistake about that. I mean, that's the kind of power that we've seen out of Oezdemir. Reyes is more lateral movement, stick and move, more well-rounded. Oezdemir, again, a little bit less controlled, a little bit more wild, and Reyes a little bit more put together, lateral movement, stick and move, and kind of make him, point fight a little bit, maybe get this fight to the ground, tire Oezdemir out. But again, if Oezdemir lands any of those, any one of those hands along the way, Reyes is going to go to sleep.
Well, and that's another one of those things too. Again, you talk about paths to victory, and if you've got a path to victory for a pretty big underdog there against a minus 2.
Completely agree, and it's like we talked about with Junior Dos Santos versus Derek Lewis. Lewis obviously, again, the cardio issues kind of came in there, but that was something where that hand is on. There's another fight down here as well, Marshall Phillips, that I think could potentially be like that. But Garbrandt fights, we've seen this time and time again with specifically knockout artists. they're always, as long as their cardio is okay, they're always live no matter what to kind of come back and land that right hand or left hand. We've seen it so many times when a fight looks absolutely over and somebody makes a miraculous comeback. And when you have that path to victory and when you're elite in one area, whether it be a Bermudez arm triangle, whether it be, whatever the case may be, a guillotine from, whatever, Gunnar Nelson, or whoever the case may be, if one person has that one trick up their sleeve, they're always live no matter what happens. And so it's a big price to lay. I get it. I understand it. He's more well-rounded, should be able to employ his game plan, just has to avoid that, the hands, and that's a lot easier said than done. But again, philosophically, the underdog, path to victory is a very real thing, and he's very live in that spot.
All right, so let's go to that Phillips and Marshman fight that you were mentioning there. Marshman, a minus 160 favorite in that one. What are you seeing from this fight?
Yeah, striker versus striker. This one should not last long. Hoping for a 2.5 over/under round prop to maybe take a little bit of an under. Maybe the fight doesn't go the distance. These guys both have shown the potential to go to the distance, but this fight is so interesting to me because Marshman and Phillips are basically the two guys that you want to put on auto fade, put your blockers on, and just bet against when they're going up against grapplers. A combined 0-4, 0-2 between the two of them when they go up against grapplers, no matter who they are. They have no wrestling defense, and every time that they are put up against grapplers, you're going to look to try to bet against them because they just don't have that part of their game down. That being said, the UFC kind of did both of them a favor here and said, here is your exact replica. Go in there, bang it out, and somebody's going to fall. And that's really what I feel like is going to happen here. Neither guy has great defense. So whoever, is just average at defense is probably the person to not get knocked out here. So again, the same type of theme throughout here. It makes a lot of sense to go Phillips plus 145 when this fight is likely to end via knockout. Marshman, again, I understand why the price is where it is. He's a little bit more polished, a little bit more experienced, been through the ringer, been through absolutely everything. But they should be, standing in there and maybe another fight of the night candidate with some violence involved. So the casual fan, very likely to enjoy this fight. And again, it's the same type of theme throughout here. The underdog makes sense from a price standpoint, but I would lean towards Marshman in a vacuum if you're asking me, just because he's a little bit more polished.
All right, so then I guess I have to ask. I mean, we talked about this on one of our early shows. Is this a spot where you sort of look to free roll the fight and maybe take both guys, by a finish?
Definitely. And again, that's something you can get reverse middled on. So if you do that, instead of, doubling your risk size, again, at a nice payout like that, maybe you do, half your bet size on both and try to work a little arbitrage that way. That being said, I think that's a little bit built into the lines here. I'm not sure how much value if you're going to be able to get via knockout for a guy like Marshman. Maybe you can do plus money. I haven't looked into it, honestly. Phillips, I would think at plus 145 is still pretty good value. Maybe you get like a plus 165, 175. Again, it's not a huge, that type of prop is usually, again, much like the Gunnar Nelson one, I would assume their most obvious path to victory is usually, built into their prop. It's not kind of a blanket, if you do via knockout, you get, plus 40 points to your bet or anything like that. So definitely look into it. If there's any way to turn Marshman into plus money via that way, or Marshman inside the distance, or Marshman just via knockout, definitely makes some sense to maybe split your bet up a little bit and do both like that, just like you said.
All right, so we head down to the preliminary card here. We'll take a look at the things that you like on the prelims. All of this card on ESPN Plus. So anything on the prelim card that you're kind of interested in?
Yeah, when we look at this Diakese fight versus Joe Duffy, I mean, Joe Duffy minus 220, Mark Diakese plus 180. People forget, I mean, Joe Duffy, Irish Joe Duffy holds a win over Conor McGregor. I think a lot of people really forget that and kind of what he's been through within the UFC. Diakese, I mean, plus 180. I understand it. Look, he was one of the hottest prospects in the business. Appears that he's really kind of, clear and past that in not a great way. 3-fight losing streak coming into this. Explosive, unpredictable guy, but the technical aspect of his game, the fundamentals of it, just never really developed. He was a guy that fell in love with the finish, the flashy knockout. And when that wasn't available to him, to guys that had, a much better set of fundamentals and technical know-how, he faltered when he wasn't able to, again, get that knockout, get that flashy variance type of win. Again, same thing here. Duffy's the more well-rounded guy across the board, and he just has to be able to, again, this is a very similar situation. Diakese, in my mind, has one way to win, and that's the flashy knockout. You're never going to see it coming. He has a little bit of Uriah Hall in him, a little Lando Venata. You're going to see, he'll be losing a 30-26 and has the potential for a spinning back kick off the cage with a DDT at the end. I mean, he's that type of explosive guy in theory. But Duffy has the fundamentals down to a point that Diakese just does not, and I don't see that happening. That being said, again, the same narrative throughout here. If Diakese lands one throughout this fight, you're going to be, upset as a Duffy backer. But I just don't see if there was one out there that I think would play out very simple, this is Duffy with a much better fight IQ. Play this one safe, dirty box, up against the cage, stick and move, and try to, work his fight that way. A Joe Duffy decision, very likely here to get to the scorecards. And Diakese, I just don't think is ever going to regain, what he had. He set the world on fire, but that's what you have to look at when you're looking at prospects coming up via these amazing finishes. It looks great. It's awesome, but you have to look and see, can they win a decision? Because that knockout is not always going to be there. And especially guys as kind of experienced and well-rounded like a Joe Duffy. So that price certainly makes some sense. But again, if you're looking for an underdog with at least a knockout chance, Diakese certainly has it at plus 180.
Christian Pina, who's work you can find on the Sports Gambling Podcast, and also go read his preview over at BangTheBook.com here for this fight, at Christian Pina, Pina, on Twitter. Christian, appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, buddy. Sounds good. Take it easy.